This is Ian with Ian on Therapy. I'm going to be using a television show that people might have watched, or they can watch, to help explain certain relationship principles. There's a fascinating show called Married at First Sight. One of my top students pointed this out to me, this interesting show. People get married without having met, and there's a panel of experts that puts them together based on characteristics and background, all these things. So you might have seen the show. I want to contrast two different couples and how they had different interactions. So the first couple is Monet and Vaug. If you remember, they were the African-American couple. And the relationship went, I don't want to give away the spoiler and everything, but they had a lot of conflict in the relationship. And everyone's blaming Vaug for being negative and immature and these things. So people were saying, well, is it Vaughn's decisions that he made that ruined it, or is it that he is like really messed up inside and has problems? Let's assume for a moment that it is the decisions he made. That's a mouthful. Let's assume that it is the choices he made that ruined the relationship. At the end of the video, I'll explain more. So he said some outlandish things and critical things. When they first got married the first night, he said that, oh, you're too, Monet, you're too bubbly. You're too, outgoing. And she said, you wanted somebody bubbly and outgoing. And then on the honeymoon before that, he said, oh, I don't think you're attentive to my needs. And he also said some other things you probably remember from the flashbacks and things. And that really soured the relationship. So just some basic lessons about communication in couples. Communication is one of those buzzwords. Oh, you need communication. Yeah, of course, you need communication. People know that, but you need to learn the tools, the nitty-gritty tools, for what that means. So let's talk about positivity and negativity. The famous marital researcher John Gottman showed that you should have a ratio of at least 5-to-1 positive to negative comments in relationships for relationship health. So people use this in business. The United States women's soccer coach used this. And there were no studies done in other areas besides marital, relationships, but they assume it works other times, and I'm sure being positive works other times as well. But people think this means that if you say a lot more positive things than negative, your relationship can be tolerated, or you can have, good happiness. It's more than that. If you have enough positive comments, what happens is a psychological phenomenon called positive sentiment override. This means that you start to perceive your spouse as a source of positivity. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You feel really good about them. Your mind is almost, your mind is not objective. You like them so much that your sentiment, how you feel about them, is overridden by positivity. And if you say enough negative things, you have negative sentiment override. You can have horrible feelings about them. You assume they're out to get you. You assume they're critical. So if like an onlooker they did studies where objective onlookers would look and they would say, hey, they were just being normal, but the couples found each other to be extremely positive if they said a lot of positive comments. So one of the keys to a relationship is that in the moment, you can use communication to totally change your view of your spouse and the emotional connection you have with them. So let's assume that Vaughn made personal choices to make negative comments. And I'll say even more than that. When you get married and you're newlyweds, sometimes you will feel uncomfortable with your spouse until you feel settled and connected. So he felt overwhelmed. He did not want to go to brunch with her. He wanted to be alone all Sunday. But no one told him that these things are normal and how to communicate. Someone should have said to him, Vaug, you are super introverted and Monet is very extroverted. You might feel uncomfortable with her and you need to find a way to compromise. Again, compromise is the buzzword in marriage. Compromise is not just like, fine, I'll do this, fine, I'll do that. Let's meet 50% in the middle, like a nerd. No. Compromises comes from the communication that you have, the ongoing communication. So if she would have said, I love brunch, he could say, I want to go to brunch with you. I want you to know that I'm more introverted and I get overwhelmed. So I would like to take some man time in order for me to handle that. And she could say, great, I'm glad you told me about that. Let's try to plan our Sunday so we can get both. And over time, we'll see if you can tolerate more brunch, if I need you to not be introverted one Sunday, if we need to get ready for the holiday or something. That is communication right there. It's not just a buzzword. It's not just let's talk. It's saying your need and working it out with your spouse. How can you compromise in a practical way? So, assuming Vaughn chose to make comments that way, it actually made it so that as they were there together for those 5 weeks, they started to believe they were not a good match. They started to believe negative things about each other. When he said he was just trying to be civil, she took it as a horribly negative thing. However, psychologically, if they would have had a lot of positive comments and good communication, they would have said, oh, it is a good match, but we're having struggles. That's totally different than, it's a bad match, could we salvage it? It's the same two people. Let's assume it's a good match from the experts, but just the way you communicate gives you a whole perspective, interpretation about everything in a relationship. Pretty deep stuff, huh? So if they would have worked it out and said very positive things, it's very likely that they would have kept dating and going. Now, it might not have worked out later. That's possible. But they would have had a whole different approach to the situation based on positivity. And let's go to the other couple, Courtney and Jason. Their relationship was very good. We know they had a lot of strains in their relationship. But if you look closely, every time they interact, they always try to find something positive about it. Even though you're going to go to the fireman school, fireman academy, we can still find our time together. We can still have time after that. If you're constantly, obsessively looking for good in the relationship, that will keep your bond together. Should you speak about the bad? Yeah. Some of the time, once a week family meeting, if it's really necessary, you talk about the bad and how to fix things. You have to fix things. And John Gottman showed about 30% of things couples fight about, you got to fix. And about 70%, it's just a difference of personality. You'll never fix it. So stop fighting. Work it out, or realize it's a difference in compromise. So the basic idea here is positivity versus negativity can totally revolutionize your relationship. And Gottman uses the word positivity. I know people say it's not a word, but Gottman uses it, so I'm going to use it. So if you keep trying to find compromise, if you keep trying to repair your broken conversation, it's another Gottman thing. If you keep trying to repair your broken communication, then you can keep going down that line of positivity. And you might be uncomfortable at the beginning. You might feel overwhelmed if you're an introvert. You might feel pushed away if you're an extrovert. But know that feeling somewhat uncomfortable is normal, and you work on it. If you're really having abusive dialogue, if you're really horribly uncomfortable, okay, that's more serious. But even though people deny wanting the Cinderella story, people still think they should be constantly holding hands, constantly talking. Even on the honeymoon that they had, Monet and Vaug, they should be constantly holding hands, constantly be okay. So that's my basic idea. I'll explain in a different video. Now let's do it now. The thing with Vaug. Even if Vaug was unhealthy inside, it wasn't just his behavior. Someone like him with his personality, if he's more cognitive, if he would have changed his behavior and speech, like CBT, he would have changed his cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it would have changed his emotions. And some other people need to talk about their trauma in therapy to feel good about themselves and to solve their behavior, the way the behavior comes from the emotions. But I think actually, even if it's an inner immaturity that he has, unhealthiness, it actually could have been worked out through the marriage. And even if not through the interaction, it could have been worked out through therapy or whatever. So I actually think it very much could have worked out as a couple. Not that it didn't, don't want to be a spoiler. Anyway, Ian on therapy, be positive obsessively.